nice and comfortable. So we're going to start with a 7-minute pre-meditation. We'll take like a 30-second breath or break, and then we'll move into 12 minutes after that, okay? When you hear this sound, let it be a signal for your body, for your mind, to know that it's time to meditate. And begin by fully relaxing, making sure that you're seated upright, each vertebrae stacking on top of each other. And begin naturally relaxing and breathing out of your nose. Just an easy inhale and exhale. Begin to notice your body, scanning all throughout, relaxing your body in its most natural form. Check to see if there's areas that may be hot or maybe cold. If there are certain areas of your body that are vibrating, other areas that are tense. Begin by relaxing all aspects of the body so that's settling in its most natural state. Tension in the neck, release with every exhale. Tension in the jaw, release. Attempt to identify where you have the most amount of tension that's stored in your body. And using your breath, inhale, keeping your mind bright and alert, and exhale all the tension. Now, move to the speech. Clearly you're not speaking, but where is there chatter and noise? Begin to identify where that may be. And with every exhale, begin to release all that noise. Commentaries, for now, just let it go. And now begin to move to the space of the mind. And begin to also use the same techniques with the breath, releasing all mental images that occupy the space of the mind. Thoughts, so that you have begun to settle the body, the speech, and the mind in its most unobstructed and natural state. Stretch out a little bit if you need to. You can open your eyes. Here we go. Begin by breathing again, rebalancing yourself. A few rounds of breath, inhaling and exhaling through your nose only. And I want you to think about one person that you know out in the world who is suffering or who is in a lot of pain. It could be physical pain, mental pain. Identify this person. Now, imagine where this person is right now, or how you think about this person. Are they in their home, Are they at work? See them in the environment that you associate them to. Are they in the hospital? What are they wearing? What time of day is it? Can you see their suffering in how they speak or how they live, their worries and anxieties? Start to really feel their suffering, the fear that they have, what they're struggling with. Try to connect to that fear so that you have empathy. Where you can really feel their pain. Try to see how you also have an understanding of that pain and how it relates to you in your life. And how badly you wish they were happy and not suffering anymore. How badly you wish that you can give them everything they want to be happy, satisfied. This should be something where you're not just intellectually understanding it. It should be something you can feel in your body. Then I want you to bring this person who you've been visualizing in their environment and bring them right in front of you, sitting right across from you on the floor, knee to knee, and look at them straight into their eyes. Observe the color of their eyes. And holding that desire and wish to want to help them in any way possible. Begin to start drawing all the pain and all the suffering that they have and hold in their mind's eye, in their body, in their speech, and begin to draw it, pulling it from their body in the form of what looks like black soot, so that it starts to hover like a black, thick cloud between you and this person. Draw every little piece. You're taking every bit of suffering that you can think of out of this person. Pulling it all out. And then I want you to slowly take all of that tarish soot that's hovering and consolidate it nice and tight into a ball. And bring it close to you, right underneath your nose. And on the count of 3, I want you to inhale all that suffering that's in the form of black soot in through your nose, and imagine it going directly into your heart. 1, 2, 3. I want you to convert that soot that's been into your heart into radiant white light, destroying all of that suffering. And look and see this person in their environment or sitting across from you, watching how their face has completely transformed. How is her body transformed? spend a couple of minutes visualizing and seeing what they look like. How do they exist? What does it feel like being around them with all of their suffering removed? Rejoice with what you have done. Celebrate what you have done for this person. And dedicate your intention. Nice. How was that? It's been a long time since I led Tonglen. Was that okay? It was really nicely focused. It was it felt really good in the room. Yeah, that's a beautiful practice. For those of you that don't do it regularly, and it speaks to you, it's such a sweet one to do. It's actually really first. I will just know it's been. I have to be honest. It's been a long time since I've done a Tonglen. I have other practices I do, but I don't do that one often. And I recently have been noticing, especially with the work that I do, of how much I've been physically taking on other people's stresses and concerns and anxieties and fears. And I've been noticing it a little bit. Armando's pointed out a bit where he can tell I just get really upset by certain things that happen. And for me, it's my stomach. Like the first time, like when that starts to turn, I know that I'm internalizing it. And the nice thing about, the profound thing about this meditation is that you don't harbor it, you don't hold it. And I don't know what it is where, I don't know if it's a maternal thing or if it's an egoic thing or if it's just habituated, where when I tend to help other people or be there for other people or support, like I have to, we talk about like the weight on our shoulders. Sometimes you hear that and you feel that weight, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be something where you can transform it like the way you do in a Tonglen, and it doesn't need to feel like a burden or something you carry, and that's a hard thing for some of us sometimes. It's been for me, so it's nice that I was able to do that in class today. Thank you. Anything anyone wants to say or share or question? Good. Okay. Nice. Was that the first time for anyone in this room? Was it? Okay, great. Yeah. It's a very visual one. The more visual your meditations can be, the better. That's the one thing that I really love about the Tibetan Buddhist meditations in general. They tend to be very visual. So for those of you that are, it's super fun and can be really elaborate and juicy. So this one, and this one in particular, if there are people in your life that are not just people you like, that you want to do a Tonglen on, it's also really powerful to do a Tonglen on people you don't like, and to be able to find that way, and that ground where you do understand that there is no separation between your suffering and theirs. We're all in the same boat together.
Makes it a lot harder to not like them after you do it.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah, if you really sit with it and you do it, for sure. You know, because you realize the suffering nature of being human, you know. Yeah. Until you see them again and then you're like, oh man, just kidding. And then you go back on the cushion and you're like, no, no, no. Yeah, for sure. Nice. Okay. Last week we talked about the 3 levels of reality. So we've been talking about valid perception, right? And I know I'm going to keep reiterating, but that's the nice thing about how I'm starting to relook at the course of giving us more time to talk about it. So we've talked about valid perception. Specifically, the way we've talked about it is it's an ordinary perception with an unaffected mind, right? Just very easy. There's nothing really cryptic about it. It's something that we do all the time. It's, you know, when your mind's not affected, when we look at something, you know, you see, okay, that's a very dirty glass. Glass, um, um, no big deal here, right? So we've talked about that for the last class or two. We also talked last week about the 3 types of reality specifically. I'm not going to have you go and do the Tibetan, but Nyungyur is, we said, was those things which you can perceive without any problem. So it's really the obvious things that you see when you have valid perceptions. Um, Shape, sounds, colors, touch, using your senses that you have, right? What does that look, what is that, what is just the straight up, you know, perception that we have? You know, there's a woman sitting in front of me who's wearing all black, she has a bun, whatever that is, right? So it's the obvious perception that you have, the apparent reality that we've been talking about. The second reality that we talked about last week was called kokyur. And kokyur are those things which are hidden. So these are more subtle things that we see in terms of the realities that we're talking about. So you have kind of the obvious realities that you have, and then there are subtle realities. What do subtle realities look like? Give me an example, anyone. Here's an,
You have a pen and you hide it behind the back and it drops, and it's like, oh, she probably dropped the pen behind the back, but I didn't actually see that.
right, right.
When you deduce.
When you deduce, right? When we use deductions. That's not a new thing, right? We use deductions all the time, every day, right? All the time, right? And I don't know, sometimes there are even, they kind of lead to assumptions in a way, right? But we use deductions all the time. You walk out and you see 2 cars that have, it looks like there's some sort of accident, and depending on what you're seeing, you'll make a deduction. Like, there must have been a car accident because that car was moving too fast and this car was moving too fast. Do we actually observe that? No, right? But you deduce. So there's these subtle realities that are out there where you haven't had a direct perception of what's going on, but you've had a deduction. You've deduced based on what you're seeing is going on. You've decided what that reality looks like. Yeah, that makes sense, right? The problem that we have with deductions, which is the trickiest thing, is that we often make deductions that are incorrect and that get us into trouble, right? My husband is texting and I'm like, hey, what are you texting? And he's like, oh, nothing, and puts his phone down. I'm like, are you hiding something? Or are you texting? You know, or it's like, are you sexting somebody? Are you seeing something? You know, it's like you can get into these weird things where you start to make these deductions in life, right? Is you know, you go in and you want to get a raise, and you think that you go in and you ask for a raise and you're having a conversation with your boss about a raise, and your boss decides to not give you a raise, and you can make a deduction like, maybe if I had spoken a certain way, maybe if I had said something, maybe if I wore something differently, if I had done certain things, perhaps I would have gotten a raise. You don't know that for sure, You know, we make deductions all the time because we also don't know, we don't know someone else's mind, right? We can't see that. We don't have a direct perception of what's happening in our boss's mind, right? Someone Ming comes over and starts screaming at me, and I'm deducing he hates me, and that's why he's screaming at me, right? Little do I know that Ming just had a really crappy day, and he's just, you know, letting out and venting out on me, and that's really what, it has nothing to do with me at all. But I make a deduction like, oh, you must hate me, right? I mean, I make deductions. I don't make them all the time, but I do have these moments where, like, you know, when I'm teaching, for instance, and it's a very typical one that teachers talk about, but we make deductions where students leave class and you're thinking, oh my God, I must be such a bad teacher. It's so bad you had to leave. And that's not even true either, because I don't know what that student's mind's thinking and what's happening and what that is. And so we make these deductions all the time. So this reality that we're talking about is, what are the hidden things that we have that are happening in these realities that we make deductions? And why we study logic is to be able to start logically making deductions so that they're not these incorrect assumptions or deductions that we make. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. Then we talked about Shinto Kokir. And Shinto Kokir was the deeply hidden phenomena. So it's really, so you have kind of subtle or hidden reality, and then you have a deeply hidden reality. What goes in the category of deep and hidden reality? Karma. Yeah. So the thing that's even, so why is it that, you know, the example we had last week was, why is it that those kids got shot in Florida? You know, I don't get it. I don't understand that. Why did that happen? You know, what's the karma behind that? You know, things that are unexplainable. So, you know, last week we talked about how it's become culturally acceptable to say when you don't know why things happen the way they do. You know, our society responds and says, I don't know, that's just the way it is. I don't know, there's no answer for it. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's an answer to everything. Everything has a certain order and explanation based on our principles that we've talked about in class and continue to talk about. And so this area of hidden phenomena, or deeply hidden phenomena, is really going to be things where you can't perceive it, and you almost even can't think about it. You can't think through it. There isn't something that really makes a lot of sense. It's really a type of reality where beings with realizations, beings who are enlightened, will really understand and truly understand. The area that we'll be focusing on, we'll be talking about all of these points, but you know, a big part of the areas that we'll be talking about is in the reality of the second one, where it's the hidden phenomena. That's the category where emptiness is also considered. You don't need to necessarily have to emptiness, for instance, right? You can have the direct perception of emptiness and have that direct experience, or you can also use deduction and have an intellectual understanding of what emptiness means. So in the second reality is the area that we start to talk about what are the ways that logic can be used. How do we deduce and use logical reasoning to be able to look at one of the main things that we're going to be talking about throughout this course, which will be, not that slide. Well, I'll leave that up there for now. Which will be, how is it possible for the Buddha to ever lie? Yeah. And one thing we also mentioned last week that we talked about was, are the three levels that we see, the three realities that you see, can they be mutually exclusive or not, right? And where do we land on that? Does anyone remember? Can the three realities be mutually exclusive?
I wasn't here, but I want to say no.
Why not?
Or like mutually exclusive in the sense like,
Can they,
can they coexist?
Can you perceive all three levels or two levels at the same time?
Yeah,
obvious things in a situation and kind of deduce in my own mind what the subtext is, and then maybe at the same time go deeper back to like how to create this.
Mhm. Yeah. So based on the subject, right, based on the person and their capacity, you can actually have all three levels at the same time seen, or two levels at the same time. But all three can actually happen. Like the Buddha can actually see all three realities all at the same time. So it has nothing to do with the actual object itself. It has to do with the subject, the person who is perceiving, the perceiver. Yeah. Okay. So tonight we're also going to talk about two types of valid perceptions. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. We've talked about different types of valid perceptions. We have direct, well, here we go. Sorry. We have, can we say nungsum sema? Again, nungsum sema. So nungsum is direct. It's not dependent on reasoning. And sema, correct perception. So this is either you can call it direct correct perception or direct valid perception. So it's to perceive evident reality, right, using our senses. So it's specifically using awareness of thought, not judge. It's not judgment, it's a direct perception that you have. And the direct perception doesn't have to be a visual perception. It's using your five senses, right? So you can have a perception. We talk about it in Tibetan Buddhism as the five sense consciousness. And so, as well as a perception of your own thoughts. So you can have direct perceptions where your body can be the direct perception that you have. It may not be something that you see. It's not, when we think perception, I think we think with our eyes, but it's not that. So you can feel heat, right? That's a direct perception. You're in a room, you're like, it's hot. That's a perception I'm having. It's not just a judgment I'm having, right? Okay. And then the second one, can you say Jepak Sema? Again, Jepak Sema. Jepak Sema. So Jepak is deduction and Sema is reasoning. So that's deductive valid perception or correct deductive reasoning. So that example that you gave about the pen, right? I'm showing you that there's a pen here and I'm deciding to let go of it and I drop it or it release out of my hand. And all of you in the room would say, what happened to the pen? If I asked you what happened to the pen, you would say, it fell on the ground. So for this half of the room, I would ask, did you see it? Yeah, you guys saw it. That's a valid perception. For you guys, did you see it? You didn't see it. So but you made a deductive reasoning that it fell on the ground, right? But how is that? But that's not a direct perception. So that's where we're talking about deductive reasoning. You didn't actually, yes, go ahead.
But I directly perceive the sound.
Yes, but that sound doesn't necessarily mean that it could have been the pen. Like as I drop this, it's possible that something else, like this cup could have fallen.
Magicians use that trick visual as well.
Yeah, sure.
So just seeing it isn't.
No. And even it's like, but you have to be like, you deduce by hearing sound that something fell or something hit the ground. But the deduction is that you made this deduction that the pen actually hit the ground by looking at, okay, she's holding this object. It's in her hand. Now it's out of her hand. I see this thing falling. I hear something, so I'm connecting those dots, right? And you can see that even the way in which we connect those dots in very obvious and subtle ways, at least I can say it for myself, I don't know about you, can get us into trouble and have gotten me into trouble, where we do look at and make these correlations that actually may not be in fact true, right? And so the thing about this process too is that you make these deductions, and then on top of it, you make it self-existent, or not you, but I make it self-existent, where I think it's self-existently a fact, and that's what it was, and that's how it must be, and that's what it should be. And of course it hit the ground, and that there may be a bunch of other different things that are going on that I didn't even consider, nor did I see. Yeah. But you're right. That's exactly what magicians do.
Yeah, I didn't mean that like
No.
I'm just wondering if all our senses are basically, we're always combining to create.
Sure.
I think it's a direct perception. But if I was blind,
yeah,
I would have to navigate the world
totally.
with the same senses a visual person does.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, but I don't think you're being nitpicky. I think that's a really interesting point, because I think that what we see is that, when you look at magic in particular, there's a certain play that seems obvious. I mean, that's a skill set that you have, that this magician is putting onto you, right? Or at least performing in front of you. But the fact is that we do that all the time, constantly. And so, where do we look and make these deductions in our lives when we have these perceptions that we have, whether they're valid or deductive? But how do we start to look? Because there's something about when we have perceptions, we think I've noticed too, and we'll talk about it tonight if it even comes up, but we make it a right or wrong. Like, it must be true, it must be right, and that's not necessarily the case. That we get stuck with these perceptions that start to influence our thinking and make things self-existent, right? So this is for those that are doing homework. There's a famous opening statement that's from the commentary on valid perception that Master Dignaga said. So I'm going to walk this through with you guys. Can you say Semar, Gyurpa, Drola, Penshepa, Tupa, Deshek, Kyopla, Changsal Lo. One more time. Semar, Gyurpa, Drola Pen, Shepa, Tunpa, Deshek, Kyopla, Changselo. Okay. So Samar is, where'd it go? Oh, there it goes. Valid perception. Gyurpa is turned into Drolar. I'm sorry, did I say Drolar? Drola. Drola is to sentient beings. Pen is benefit. Shepa is wants and wishes. Tunpa is teacher. Whenever you see a capital T, it refers to the Buddha. Deshik, which is those gone to bliss. Kyop is protector. Law is two. And Changsalo is bow down. So knowing that Tibetan moves from left to right, does someone want to take a stab at this? What does that statement say? This is where I need the Jeopardy tune, no?
who wants and wishes for the benefit of all sentient beings. Turn it into valid perceptions. I'm not sure.
Something like that. Okay, nice try. Good. Okay, that's great. This is what we have. I bow down to the person, it's good, who has, it's not fair because they didn't have 5 qualities, but the translation is who has these 5 qualities: the protector, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit sentient beings, and those who have turned into persons with valid perception. So this is a logical statement that has 5 parts. It's the basis of extensive study, and in our reading, you'll see that it's talked about in the 2nd chapter. We'll be going into detail with this statement for the I think next course and the course after, or the next class. I'm sorry. This comes from, like I said, Master Dignaga. It's a dedication. So in the beginning of every scripture and every book, there's always a dedication that you have. And Master Dignaga decided to make his dedication in choosing to bow down to the Buddha, who has these 5 qualities or these major elements. The statement breaks down to the first point, which is those who have turned into one with valid perception. The second part is those who wish to benefit living beings. The third one is the teacher, referring to the Buddha. The fourth part is those that have gone to bliss. And the fifth part is the protector.
Should we go to the last slide really quick?
Right before it?
Yeah.
Mhm. Do you want the statements too?
Yes.
No. Also, in the Dropbox link that I've provided you guys, the class notes are in there too. So if you need to pull it ever, if you don't get it, you can get from that as well. Good? Okay. Oh no, just kidding. We're not breaking yet. Almost. Still up there? Oh, sorry guys. Okay, so this is going to be the statement that we're using, that we're going to talk about for the rest of this course, that will focus on whether or not the Buddha is a person who cannot lie. Based on this scripture in particular, it's going to prove that the Buddha is a being who has valid perception and who has all these 5 qualities. And if they have these qualities, is it possible for them to lie? And that's going to inform us and lead us into past and future lives. And that's what this course is going to be about. So this will be the statement that we'll be using by way of proving the omniscience of the Buddha. We'll also start to be proving, well, it will prove what past and future's life look like. Okay. So this is kind of homework stuff that we'll talk about. Great. Okay. We're going to take a break now. Ta-da! Take a nice 10, 15-minute break, 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and do group discussions.
It's interesting that that statement is connected to the
Yeah.
proof of
Yeah.
your past life.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's like the Buddha can totally lie if he wants to be fully capable, but any other Buddha or anybody else's in mind would call bullshit and know that he's lying, so that he wouldn't want to be doing that anyway. But that he's fully capable of doing so. Right? I don't know if it's.
I mean, I think fully capable is one thing, but then what we're going to
Why
see,
would you do it, right?
the logical statement is, can you actually do it? Can you tell, do you have to tell the truth all the time? I should phrase it that way, maybe. Do you have to tell the truth all the time?
Where you'd be defining truth and lie.
There's a logical statement that will be worked. So have you done Buddhist logic ever? There's a very particular formula and format. So you'll see that it builds. It's kind of like algebra. It reminds me of algebra, where you build and it makes sense. And so you have certain things that have to be true that we all agree to, and then it builds based on that logic. Yeah.
Inductive statements.
Yeah.
Because I did this, I majored in philosophy in college.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I had to do that. For
Yeah.
our tests, we had to make a sentence.
Yeah.
Prove that it was a sound argument or prove that
That's
it was
right.
a true argument.
Yep.
You had these truth tables and break up all the words and
Yeah.
cipher it. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Stretch your legs.
about emptiness in particular. We've now talked about these different realities. Are there things that are coming up, things that you've noticed, things that you may be struggling with or not, or resolved? And if you have, please share the wealth of any knowledge. So I thought that we would open up discussion and see where everyone's at. And do a little group check-in.
Let's talk about judging.
We're gonna pass the mic around.
No, it's, you can do that.
Or is it okay, or is it working? Okay.
Well, I have this other one.
Oh, great, let's do that.
You just have to speak up a bit.
Okay. You know, or Suzanne, sorry, Suzanne. It's like, here. No, that's not what she sounds like. Suzanne, you don't sound like that, by the way. Just,
It is really hard when you're watching it
yeah, I know.
because it is hard to hear
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
But I've thought about judgment and how we react to events. Like using the pen example, it's like all these things that we deduce, really, we shouldn't be deducing. We shouldn't be judging. I shouldn't be saying shouldn't. I tend to judge the person who bumps into me
Right.
instead of judging the perception.
Yeah.
So I react, it's like I'm judge, jury, and sentencer right away. Jerk bumped into me. Because the next thing I see is the jerk running to catch the train.
Right. Right.
So in my mind, I hear the pen drop
Right.
because I see her running. I'm like, so she bumped into me. Like, well, what if someone pushed her into me? Right. So I'm judging the
intention on their end.
Yeah,
And
I'm
who-
judging the person instead of reacting to the event.
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like if somebody bumps into you, it's just a sensation.
Right.
Why did I even let it bother me? And why did it take so long? And it's just really frustrating. Because I want to look at each event as it happens without putting any weight on it, without any of the judgment. You just want to go, oh, yeah, I fell down.
Yeah. Yeah.
The pen dropped.
Right.
Because getting bumped into shouldn't really be any different than a pen falling.
It's just a percept, right? It's like, oh, someone bumped into me, but then what you plaster onto, he's a jerk and he's so disrespectful, and why can't he be more? You know, it's like New Yorkers, or I don't know, you're in Jersey, so I don't know what that is, but
Way worse. Let me tell you. Everybody who's from New York knows how much worse New Jersey is.
Right, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think the thing about valid perception, which is interesting, the study of it is, it's strictly just talking about what is it that you see, how is it valid, where's your mind unobstructed, and it's not, you know, it's not like your valid perception is any more valid than yours, right? And there's, or I think, you know, that there's only one valid perception, right? We only have one. There's only one valid concept or one valid way of looking at things, which is actually a judgment. It's just what we think is the right way of looking at it. So when we have, even in the emptiness conversation of how many G's are in the room, it's always interesting to look up how we think our perception or what we think our ideas are really, there's only one idea that exists, you know, and how we move around, and how does that even start to affect the subtleties of how we exist in the world, where if you think, you know, in even the most subtle way, there must be only one valid perception or one way of thinking, and your way is the only way. What does that mean for everyone else's ways, right? You know, and where are you considering that those may also be valid as well? And what's the practice of that? I mean, that's a hard one. for me for years. It's a constant thing that I'm working on at different levels. But yeah, the judgment, like, what? That's stupid. How can you think that way? Of course it's a pen.
Yeah.
It can only be a pen.
But also, it's our reaction. When we react to that deduction, in most occasions, we're almost perpetuating what we don't want to happen to us.
Yeah.
She bumped into me. She put herself in front of me. Well, just by saying that, what am I saying? I'm saying I'm putting myself in front of her. I'm so important that I can't be bumped into. Maybe she's going home because, her wife's about to give birth to a baby and she's really excited.
I always use that one, by the way.
Really?
I always use the birth one. I'm like,
Wow,
they
weird.
must be just, cutting in line because their wife or someone in their family is giving birth. They're parking in the emergency lane because they're giving birth. They're riding their bike in a way that is so inconsiderate because someone's having a baby. I don't know. That's the one that comes up. I don't know.
It's a good one. Yeah, I must have stolen it from you. Sorry.
I'm like, you must be the baby. What could be possibly so urgent?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say though, but there is that like fine line because just because it's empty doesn't mean it doesn't function.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and then it's like, but the only perception you have is the perception you have, and it's like. About how to apply the concept of emptiness to like feelings that I have about myself and others. Right? It's the same thing. But but that is what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I get that it doesn't have that it's not everyone's perception of that. But like, I can't just pretend like the water bottle isn't a water bottle, and that if my perception is that this thing sucks, that it doesn't suck. I get that the factors in it don't make it sucky from its own side, but it definitely currently blows right
Totally.
now.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get to that.
I have one of my teachers once said, he goes, when an asshole walks into the room, the asshole is coming from you, right? It's totally coming from you, but it doesn't mean that the asshole isn't functioning for you as the asshole. It still exists for you as the asshole. Knowing it comes from you, it still functions as that person for you, or that type of person for you. And when he said that, this was years ago, and I still think about it, where it gives me a bit of satisfaction to know I'm not crazy, or I don't need to convert everything. It's not what it is. It's you have to be able to, all of us, while we practice, there is a conventional reality and the ultimate reality that you're counterbalancing, or else you're just going to start losing it. Because the karma isn't there for you to always see things ultimately, then we're practicing both of them simultaneously. Where things do function, and they should, and if things do suck, it's like, it sucks. It's not great. It's a bad situation that I may be in or experiencing. I understand it comes from me, but it doesn't mean that I have to like it. There's something about this idea where when we accept and realize that things come from us, that we have to agree to liking it. Like, oh, of course I accept and I realize that I'm such a jerk. You don't have to like it. You don't have to, and if you don't have the karma or the ability or the capacity to see that a situation that may feel like it's so sucky to you at the moment, in that moment you may not be able to see that. And trying to, I think, push it to convert it or change that is so incredibly difficult. And sometimes it really is. I'm going to bring it back to even the meditation and why I'm so big on starting our meditations with this kind of, primer where we're relaxing, because if you can just step away and just relax, sometimes you can see the message a lot easier and clearer. It's like I need to make it not suck anymore. I need you to not be such an asshole anymore. That can actually make it, I think,
you know, you're trying to self-existently transform somebody into something else self-existently, when that's not it. It's something is rising. And, you know, the same teacher would say the same thing, where he would say, you know, when things happen, you just, you know, you let it go through you. Instead of trying to always, I mean, that's me, I tend to kind of clench. You're like, I'm gonna change you. You're not gonna be that person anymore for me, you know. But I think that it doesn't need, at least for me, it hasn't been that way, where if it is bad or it sucks or it's difficult, and that's okay, it is that. And it may not be, it just may be, you know, that's where I am right now, and that's okay. And then hopefully, thank God, it will pass. That should, you know, that too shall pass. And it's true. And sometimes just letting it go and taking the power out of it helps. You know, you were going to say?
You kind of addressed what I was wanting to ask, but maybe I'll make the point anyway.
Yeah, please.
You, in your example of, and I have to say, of course, I haven't been to the previous classes, so in the previous example where you were talking about imagining that someone's running because there's a birth involved, it seems like there's still, I mean, it's a positive judgment in a sense,
Totally.
but it's still a judgment.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and if there was no birth involved, you could, I mean, I'm saying one could use like curiosity, maybe a compassionate curiosity, to just think about, you know, that person that bumped into me, there's no birth involved.
Yeah.
But wherever they came from, whatever circumstances have brought them to this point, they were going to bump into you. You know, whatever's a bad day. And is that any less valid than there's a birth happening? And then what does that mean in terms of us making judgments? You know, even if we're imagining positive judgments, are we? But I think what it makes me think you answered is that we have to sort of go back and forth. I know it's an equivocation, but we have to think in a conventional sense to give us a little breathing space. And then there's an ultimate reality that we probably won't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
It's true. I mean, the birthing, I mean, I'll be honest, the birthing exercise is something I did for years, where I just thought, oh, it must be someone having a pregnant, or someone who's having a baby, or someone who's, there's an emergency at the ER, they need to rush to that person. And because that was what my capacity was for a long time, or that otherwise I get heated or defensive, or feel it was a personal something against me, you know. And then with doing deeper work for myself, it's easier to, it's like I custom where I'm like, well, maybe there is another reason. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, Armando and I had this big discussion yesterday about people parking on the, what was that?
There's a huge hole in the middle of the road, and you know, someone's put cones there, but then the cars will come in and park on the side, so it's hard to get around that big hole that you don't want to drive over.
And there was a no standing area that you shouldn't park in. There were cars parking there. And he was so upset. We were so upset. Yeah, he was like so annoyed, like so disrespectful. Like, why do people make life so difficult? You know, just really, really upset. And I said, you have no idea what's going on. You know, you don't know what kind of emergency that may be in, or not, or whatever. But we don't know. And so there's a difference of saying that's really inconvenient for me. You know, I don't know why. Why am I seeing that? Where have I inconvenienced other people, right? There's that work. And then on top of it is refraining from that judgment of like, you're such an inconsiderate, blah, 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 that goes on, right?
But is that a joint inconvenience since we were together?
Well, I wasn't inconvenienced as much as you were. You know, there it is. And I don't know, it's her fault. It doesn't hurt. We were together, but it didn't bother me as much. I mean, you know, that's a really good point where we're experiencing that together, but karmically it's ripened for you, and it's something that upsets you more than me. I didn't notice, but I don't really care. It's fine.
And even if you have like a room full of people or folk or an entire country agreeing with you on your perception, doesn't make it any more.
Does it make it any more valid?
Yeah. I'm saying it's probably not. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about how more valid it is. I mean, if it's valid to you, it's valid. You know, I mean, it sounds like what you're hinting at is, does it make it any more, does it make it more right? Or does that make sense? Is that what you're asking?
Because it's strengthening our conviction. Yeah, anyway.
You know, I mean, valid perception is a tricky thing because it does to really, it's a slippery slope where it's like, if everyone thinks, you know, that, if all of society or everyone that you have in your community thought that those two cars were such an annoyance, you know, does that mean that your perception's even more right? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean it's any more anything. You know, I mean, I think sometimes we think that people are aligning with us, and that's why we like to have alliances where we think it reinstates our. It doesn't reinstate our perception. I think it reinstates the validity of what we think is right and wrong, and that even further goes into your ego. Right. If the conversation, if the thinking, not the but the thinking was, there are these two cars that are parked here, and it's very inconvenient for everyone else. I wonder why they did that, you know. And it stops there. It should probably stop somewhere around there. Why is it inconvenient? Where have I inconvenienced other people? How do I change situations in my life where there's less inconvenience? How do I better even look at ways of supporting my community? You know, where I see a piece of trash, I'm going to pick that up because I want to make it a nice place for other people to live. I mean, that's part of one of the bodhisattva vows, even, of, you know, when you start to look at that, when the afflictions arise, right? And I've said this before in class, that when the afflictions arise, instead of trying to have the satisfaction of it being valid or not, it's valid. You don't need to have the satisfaction and the check, like, is it valid? Or, like, you know, you experience it, it's true. Why you are reacting to the way that you are to that situation and experience is really the key. That's the key. You know, valid perception is valid perception. I see Sanjay wearing a hat, you know, you're wearing a black sweater, you're wearing a scarf. Those are all valid perceptions. You know, if I have 1,000 people that are like, yes, he's wearing a sweater, does that make my valid perception more valid? No. And if I had no one, does that make it more valid or not as valid? No, it's still mine. You know, it's not about having people come together to be able to reinstate the validity of it, because that's your experience that you have.
It's also it's what you're creating.
Yeah,
it's like, sure. When I was talking about judging, I mean the reaction. Why would you react? It's already happened. The event is gone.
Yeah.
Right? Woman bumped into me. Cars are parked.
Mm-hmm.
You've experienced it. Yeah. Why are you still experiencing it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, even after, like, we passed and I mean, all the way home, we were having a whole discussion. Right. It's like, but it's.
And that whole time you're generating this self-existent world. Not only are you saying it's self-existent, but you're creating negative karma by being upset.
Yeah, the judgment.
So, yeah, they're both correct.
Yeah.
Whether she's an annoying, selfish woman running to the train or whether she's a joyous woman running to see her child, they're both correct judgments.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a judgment.
Yeah.
It should be a sensory perception. I see, I feel, I hear, I taste, touch, and then you move on. You don't say, oh, I don't like that sweater. It's just a sweater. Because as soon as you say I don't like, you're creating bad karma. So how do you react to events positively instead of reacting to events by judging? Because almost any time you judge, you're going down a bad road.
I've got this general question.
Throw it out there.
Why understand a valid perception? Why understand emptiness? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's such a general basic question, but I guess I'm just raising it just to kind of see what you all feel about it. Because is it for me to just use as a tool to live within this narrative that I've just created that either makes me really happy or really sad or like whatever kind of emotion or term I want to label it as?
does the labeling even matter? Like, what does it matter? I guess, you know.
Who wants to take a stab at it? What doesn't matter?
I would say that the reason you would put so much emphasis on a valid perception is because you have to understand, because it's tied to the emptiness. Because if the thing wasn't out there self-existently, then there's something coming from me. One of those things is a ripening and a perception of a thing. And why is that important to know? It's because I want to figure out what can I do so that I am not having valid perceptions of shit, of sadness, and of suffering. And so if I could understand what my mind is perceiving, and more importantly, why I am forced to perceive what I perceive, then I could tweak the reason why I perceived that. But I would have to know what I was perceiving and what was the nature of it. I would have to be really good at understanding whatever is coming from me in order to be able to plant or to make causes to see something else. That's what I would do.
And make your future life better.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like if you want a certain result, you buy into this idea and you practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like all of us are interested in what the content is.
Yeah.
And we're interested in like taking the practice and experimenting with it. But it's like if I were to tell someone who maybe is well adjusted or like have a happy life, like, no, wait. You don't realize like your reality is, you know what I mean? I don't really, I guess I can't really like.
But someone who has a happy life will also, that will stop. And so you can pick them up when they're not feeling so happy. No. I mean, that's the whole, one of the main sufferings of being a human is what? Impermanence. And so, the happiness will stop. The fact is that we're saying is something that is, it's our karma to have suffering. I mean, suffering of death, right? Suffering of loss, suffering. I mean, there's so many different levels of suffering that we've talked about. But the question that you're asking in terms of what do you do with it? I mean, you have to practice it, and that's why in this lineage, the way that we break it down, there are those three principles that we have. That's why there's renunciation. That's why there is this idea of bodhicitta and this idea of correct view. And the more you practice, or the more I've even practiced, the more I see how incredibly profound and why those trifectas come together. Because there is the intellectual understanding, right, of emptiness and karma and working that. But if you're just doing that, I found if you're just doing that and you don't have bodhicitta at all, then it's not as beneficial. And on top of it, if you have those two and you're playing with it, but you don't have renunciation, you don't know what that means, those two can only go so far. There is this sense of understanding and letting go that the way in which the world has functioned for you, that narrative that's been created, that's been handed down to you generation after generation, or the karma that you've had to have that narrative in your life, that no longer functions anymore in the way that you see it. So in order to shift that, there are those three principles that we talk about, and they have to be done in tandem. And I think the power is really about doing all three and working at them, and just it's like they're like channels. You just kind of tweak each one and I work it. And there are times where bodhicitta is the thing that I'm really working on even further. So I really practice that. Or there's an emptiness and karma concept. Or there are and that's why you have teachers, because renunciation, I mean, I'll just it's not going to happen voluntarily for me. It's not.
I'll renunciate to a point, but that's not even renunciation. That's like pre-renunciation. You know, it's the teachers that will get me to the point where they're just, all right, Jee, enough tipping your toe in the water. We're just gonna push you in, you know, where they'll start to take it up a notch because they can see that threshold where I'm afraid I'm protecting myself. And so all three of those paths are so important to really getting an understanding of, does this practice really work? Does it really transform your life? If you're just doing the intellectual understanding, it's not the same. The motivation's even, it's hard. It's like, okay, I see emptiness, I see karma, okay, I see how that works. Okay, it can be a tool, but how are you motivated to keep using that tool? You know? And the bodhicitta is such a big part of that. Like, what does that even mean? How do you start to use that as the fuel to keep you going, right? And so that you're not making about yourself, because at some point, making about yourself is so exhausting, and it doesn't really go very far. You know, at some point, you can only motivate so much. I mean, how many of us in this room have a hard time taking care of ourselves? You know, it's like a number one thing I feel like in Dharma students and teachers. It's everyone's like, oh, self-care. You know, I mean, why do you think the wellness industry is blowing up in this country? Actually, in the world, you know, everyone knows that self-care is so incredibly difficult. The motivation to have it and do it for other beings, and then knowing how to bring you into that group is so helpful, I think. But that's something that you have to feel in your heart. And then while you have those two, if you think that you can do it in the exact same way that you've done and lived your life without having renunciation, the renunciation part is what's going to bring to that next level, really, to make sure that the foundation, I mean, that's the way I feel about it. It's like a foundational piece. It's what makes the soil fertile, and it's what makes the soil, you know, ripe so that seeds can grow from it. You know, so all three of those have to happen, in my opinion, in order for the practice to really, for you to experience the magic.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think that makes sense. Cause like there's a part of me where I'm like, okay, valid perception and emptiness. It's like, in a way, it makes me feel like I'm neutralizing myself to be like, okay, here was your first immediate irrational reaction to this event or to whatever it is.
Right.
And then, okay, taking a breath, taking some space, understanding where is it coming from. It's not coming from that, so how is it coming from me?
Right.
And then going back further and like trying to find instances of like, what have I done to other people to necessitate this if I believe in the concept of karma? So then in a way, it's like I get to a place of neutral, and then I'm just kind of like, then where do I put the gear in now?
Right.
I just neutralize myself. Good. But then, you know, I've heard through other classes and teachings that it's about like planting seeds for the result of like creating a world or creating the karmas of what you want to see, which sounds kind of like individual to you as a person, but also within the whole concept of ending suffering for all living beings. But it always starts with you, because it's like, okay, it's all coming from me. My reality is coming from me. I'm neutralizing it. I'm trying to plant good seeds. It's just kind of, it's almost like, and then what, you know?
Well, the what is, so, you know, you look at your colleague or your boss who's just such a pain in the ass screaming at you, and you're sitting there or standing there looking at this person and be like, okay, I know this example. I remember hearing in class, the boss is coming from me, the colleague's coming from me. They're not self-existently a jerk. I'm sitting there listening, like just, you know, I just see the mouth moving and just screaming. And it's like, okay, I get it. Where have I screamed to other people? Oh yeah, I just did it yesterday to Armando. Oh shoot, that's where it probably came from. You know, okay, now what? Right now I'm to the point where I'm still annoyed, but I'm not as annoyed. I can start to use, and it's basically an analytical meditation in that moment that I'm doing, right? Now what? But now what is, what's coming out of my mouth? And what's the motivation I have that's going to come out of my mouth, right? So in that moment, am I going to be protecting myself and my heart and my ego and whatever else that goes into that pot and scream back? Or am I going to look at that person, remember the Tonglen that, you know, that I just did, or, you know, and look at that person and be thinking, my God, for you to be that angry, you must be so unhappy. You know, you must be so unhappy with your life. for you to think that, and you, I don't know, I mean, maybe you haven't been loved, I don't know what it is, that it's in your history or your life, and so then what comes out of your mouth changed, and that's the what if. Like, what do I do now? It's what comes out, and then your actions that follow through that become consistent, right? Where it's like, you know, maybe that jerk just always had too many jerks around him or her, you know, and they just need someone who knows that I'm on their side. I don't want to be, but I am. You know, I'm going to work with that. Right? How do you start to change your motivation so that what comes out of the next action or thinking or the words that come out are in line to what you believe in or what you're practicing in or trying to even get a hold of or handle of bodhicitta, you know, because that person that you're seeing that is driving you crazy, guess what? As a bodhisattva, you're trying to save that person too. He comes on the boat, you know, he has a spot, you know, and so the question then is, what can I do to help that person be in less pain? If that's my valid perception that I'm seeing, that's expressing itself in this angry, frustrated, mean, malicious way. You know, how do I take the charge out of it instead of adding more into it? What's my tactic, right? And so that's where the bodhicitta comes in so well. And that's why intentions and meditations that we've done in 3 jewels have so much with evoking that sense of dedication and thinking of others and what compassion really means. You can't be like selectively compassionate, you know? Like, you know, when you meet people and you're like, oh, that person's so shy, and they go, oh, they're not shy until you get to know them. I'm like, that's shy. That's exactly what shy is. Like, what? You know, you hear that. You know, oh, that person's so mean. No, they're not mean. They're so nice to people they like. I'm like, right. So what is that? You know, you can't be selectively compassionate. You know, and so while you're and again, you know, I've talked about this, I think, in class or course 1. In Tibetan Buddhism, we say we feel with the heart, right? Or we think with the heart. Like when we say I think, you point to your heart. In the West, we point to our, which is a whole different thing, which I have another teacher that's really upset about that, but nonetheless, it's not your brain. But we say that we think with our heart. And so the practice it's a heart practice as much as it is a thinking practice. The meditations can start from a thinking practice. Analytical meditations in general are fantastic. I love them. I'm a super big fan of them. And I can get into it, but ultimately you're not trying, it's in the heart that's going to transform your practice truly. It's something you have to feel. That's why even in the Tonglen, it's not just thinking through, you have to feel the pain, you know, to understand what it really is like to be in that kind of pain that the person you brought in front of you is experiencing. It's not a thinking practice in the end, you know? Yeah. Thanks. Good? Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Really quick question.
Yes,
so
go,
what we're
please.
studying as far as valid perception and emptiness, is that the 3rd principle path, or like how it's not correct?
It's not a path, yeah. So the 3 principles, the first one is renunciation. Yep. The second one that we've talked about is bodhicitta, and which is what? Just so we know, what's bodhicitta?
The wish to get enlightened for
Wish to be
the
enlightened.
sake of all beings.
Wait, I'm sorry, what? Huh?
The wish to get enlightened for the benefit of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the third one is, 3rd principle path.
Correct.
View,
What is it?
correct view,
Mm-hmm. Which is what?
which is perceiving that things are coming from you and not the other way around.
So all 3 of those is the practice. It's not segmented.
Okay. But when we're talking about like valid perception right now,
Mhm.
and are we focusing on that third part of correct view? Or-
It's not as regimented. Valid perception is just the baseline to talk about what perceptions look like. That's what it is. It's really just a, I don't know, I guess you could think of it like a foundational context that we're getting, so that we're talking about how are things perceived, how are things considered perceptions, if indeed it is a perception, where does it come from, and then it starts to lead into that. And it's really just so that we have the foundation, so that when we go into logic, we have an understanding of what valid perception means. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry.
Just, yeah.
Maybe I have to unplug and plug. Trying to be really good about not stealing your time. So we're trying to stay on time. That's my new karma practice, by the way. Stop stealing. Okay, here we go.
Sashi Kuki Jushin Mito Cham Rira Luchi Yende Genpari Sange Shindu Mikte Uargi Drokun Nanda Shingla Chuparshu Yang Ratnamanda Kamyetayami Gewadi Kewokun Tsunami Eshe Sosokshin Tsunami Eshe Lejungwe Dampa Kuni Toparshu.
Just going to end with a quick dedication and a rejoice in dedication. Just get comfy and just take a moment and acknowledge that you came tonight, that you took the time out of your day, out of your evening and your week to come and listen, to learn, to sit, to participate with this community. Acknowledge that, rejoice in it, give yourself credit for making it a priority tonight. Think about why you've been coming to class. What made you come tonight? What you're hoping to answer or learn. And dedicate your endeavors, your search, your commitment to someone you love. It could be one person, it could be a group. Dedicated to someone or a group of people that's also seeking and searching for the same answers that you are. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Gigi.
Thank you. Okay, nice. Next week, John Stowell.
Tell everyone you know.
Tell everyone.
So good. Does he not live here? He lives